So a few weeks ago, we can come on up, Michelle. Sorry. A few weeks ago, I talked about how the Hebrew word for work and worship are the same word. And so we've been interviewing different people about where they work and how their work gives them opportunities to serve and love people. And today, Michelle's going to do it. I'm going to switch this microphone to do that. Michelle, you agreed to do it a couple weeks ago, more than a couple weeks ago now, and then you ended up in the hospital.
I did.
And I'm so glad that you're here today and we were able to reschedule it. So thank you for agreeing to do it twice.
Of course.
So Michelle, tell us about where you work, what kind of work you do.
So I'm a hairdresser in Wayne, right down the street actually, like 10 minutes from here. I've been there for 10 years since I graduated beauty school. I was an assistant and I went my way up to a stylist and I've been there ever since.
Okay, awesome. So what are some issues you face in your work?
With work, you always have to be on. I don't know, if you go to the consistent hairdresser or stylist, you always have to be that person. Everyone comes in, they wait 6 weeks to come in, they're so excited to talk to you about everything. And then if you wake up in the day, you can't be miserable all day.
Yeah.
You have to just be on all the time and happy and upbeat and that positive person all the time, I feel like. So that's probably one of my biggest struggles.
Yeah, I know that for a while I went to a barbershop.
Yeah.
And they were always so mean to be in there. And after a while I was like, why am I going back to
What's
it?
happening?
I would be very tired.
Yeah.
So how does your Christian faith impact your ministry at work?
I feel in the mornings, I try to start my day by just praying and asking God. I feel I'm a pretty upbeat person, but everyone has really bad days, and you wake up and you're just over it. And So like if I just ask God for a little bit of extra strength that day, or like, can you just make everyone be really nice today? Not have everyone be super miserable today. It's like, you know, he always pulls through. It makes my day go nice and smooth, because there can be hiccups where like someone's color doesn't turn out right, and you're like, why is this happening to me? But like, God always comes through.
I like to pray that people are chill.
Yeah, like, just chill. I need it. Because
That's
some
what
days
I-
I know it's pretty crazy, and I'm like, it's fine, I can handle it. But like other days, I'm like, God, please give me a smooth day today. I need it. And it always comes through.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How can we pray for you as you minister at work?
Well, right now, especially like when I have my baby, going back, like our business is mostly like just clientele that follow up. So like hopefully when I go back, I can continue the workflow that I've had and just grow even more as a stylist.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Join me in praying for Michelle. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for Michelle. Thank you so much that she got out of the hospital, Lord. We're so glad that she's healthy and the baby's healthy. God, I pray that you give her a safe delivery. God, we pray that you bless her as she works, that these relationships she's developed at work, that she will continue to be able to nurture them and develop them after her pregnancy, Lord. And I pray that you will just continue to bless her there, the work that she does, and as she lives and loves like you. I pray that she is a breath of fresh air and sunshine and brings joy and peace into people's lives as they encounter her. Lord, I pray that your hand will be on her, that people will know that you're with her and that you're for her, that she'll just stand out and people will recognize there's something different about her because you're with her. And I pray all these things that you Jesus Christ will. Amen. Thanks so much for agreeing to that. I'll just take it from you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
They overthrew empires, they dealt out justice, they laid claim to promises, they shut the mouth of lions, they quenched raging fires, they made narrow escapes, they found strength at their weakest moments, they won hard battles, they put evil to flight, they saw dead people come back to life, they endured torture, they endured imprisonment, they survived on the fringes of society. That doesn't sound like your average American Christian experience, right? That sounds more like a recruitment line for the Avengers. You know, they can be like, we've overthrown empires and we've shut the mouth of lions. We've made narrow escapes. You know, you're like, oh yeah, I want to join that team. But that's exactly how the writer of Hebrews describes what the Christian life looks like when we live by faith. It looks more like the Avengers than maybe the boring monotony that sometimes we imagine. Our American version of Christianity more often looks like an education rather than an invitation to adventure. It looks sometimes more like an indoctrination rather than a passport to purpose and meaning. Many churches have Sunday schools. I don't have anything against Sunday schools. I've learned a lot about the Bible in Sunday schools. But literally, as a kid, I was like, I have school 5 days a week. Now I gotta go to school on Sunday too. Like, we think that faith is something that we exercise our minds with. And the end result is that the modern Western church is the most intelligent and the most educated, most knowledgeable church in the history of the Jesus movement, and it's the least supernatural. If you look throughout the history of the church, what made the church stand out was there was something supernatural about it. God showed up and he did things. And now we have a lot of information, but we have far too little transformation. The Christian life is not about having all the right theological answers. It's about living by faith, trusting Jesus, taking risks to make the world better because we believe he has our back. Believing that he wants to make the world better through us. Now, we started this series by considering Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. And I think there's a lot of busy churches that produce lots of busy congregants whose lives require little to no faith. And if we're not careful here at Horizon, we'll become a busy, thriving church that doesn't actually require anyone to use faith. The difference between a cold, dead spirituality and a spiritual wildfire is practicing faith with your life, not just your head. Let's look at a paraphrase of Hebrews 11:33-40. I read part of it earlier. starting in verse 33. Now, I don't have time is too short for me to tell you about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms and administered justice, who obtained promises and shut the mouth of lions, who quenched the raging of fire and escaped the edge of the sword, who gained strength and weakness, became mighty in battle, put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead, raised to life again. Other people were tortured and yet not accepting release so they might gain a better resurrection. Others experienced mockings and scourgings as well as bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they died by the sword, they wandered in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and on mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that they would not be made perfect. The Greek word behind that is the word for completion, whole, coming to the full of something without us. The list of the heroes of faith would not be complete without us. The difference between boring religious monotony and a life of adventure is faith. Putting what Jesus said to the test. Not just saying, yeah, that sounds good, I believe that, but actually testing it out. Faith is reaching the end of your resources and abilities and trusting in the unseen resources and abilities of a good and generous God. Now, the writer of Hebrews is very clear here. He or she, we don't know who wrote it, ends their list of faith by saying the list is incomplete without us. God has these heroes of faith, and he says, but he was waiting so that the list would not be complete without us, without you. Without me. It's as if the author is inviting us to overthrow governments, deal out justice, claim promises, shut the mouth of lions, quench raging fires, make narrow escapes, find strength in weakness, win hard battles, put evil to flight, and see miraculous cures. He's essentially saying, they exercise faith, now it's your turn. What are you going to do? What is faith? What is God going to do through you? The author is inviting us to live by faith and experience the adventure that comes from joining Jesus in his mission to change the world. I didn't really realize growing up adjacent to the church how dead our American Christianity was until I took my first serious trip overseas. I spent 2 weeks in India teaching children, Dalit children, the lowest caste of children in India, about how to speak and read English. And the hope was that they could, if they could speak English, they could get jobs with Western companies in India, and they could break a generational cycle of poverty and actually change their world. And so I was over there teaching English, and while I was over there, I got to know some Indian pastors. I think we have a picture of one of my friends that I met over there. And I was blown away by their stories of faith and miracles. None of them were like, hey, somebody invited me to church and I heard the story of Jesus. All their stories were radical stories. I mean, one guy was like, I was laying asleep in my bed and a cobra was crawling across my roof and fell into my bed. And so I felt something hit my feet and I sat up in bed and there was a cobra going back and forth looking at my face. And he says, I prayed to every Hindu god I could think of. They have millions of them. He prayed to all of them and the snake just kept going back and forth. His kid had been going to this English school, and they told them, the kids, about Jesus there. And so he said, I don't know this Jesus God, but I'm going to try praying to him. And he said, Jesus, if you're a God, could you make the snake go away? And the snake slithered off the bed. He said, that next morning, I had to go to that school and find out about this Jesus guy, because he was a God when the other gods wouldn't do anything. He said, that's how I became a follower of Jesus. How about you? I'm like, oh man, that was an awesome story. I'm nothing to compare to this. I mean, their lives were just filled by faith. One night they invited me to a prayer service at this Christian center I was staying at, and all these pastors from all over southern India were coming together. Some were driving for hours to get there, and they were having this prayer service. And so I went in and prayed with them, and I said, what are we praying about? They said, we're praying for this upcoming service. We're going to invite our friends and our neighbors to come hear about Jesus and how he's impacted our lives, how he's encountered us, and how he's changed us. And they said, we are praying that God shows up in a mighty way. I said, oh, is this next week? They said, no. I said, is it next month? They said, no. They said, it's a year from now. I said, wait a minute, you're praying about it a year ahead of time? I was like, I've prayed about stuff, I'm like, this is coming up, I'll start praying about it. They said, we start praying a year out because we don't have money or resources. All we have is God, so we are desperate for God to show up. Those words of that Indian pastor still echo in my head 10 years later. In America, we have money. We have resources. So we aren't that desperate for God to show up. We've tried to create a Christianity that doesn't require faith. The result is something boring and something dead, a far cry from adventure. Church planting is hard, but it's an adventure because it requires faith. I never know what's going to happen next. And that's scary sometimes, but that's also exciting. I read an article this week about when human beings are happiest. These research universities did this study of thousands upon thousands of people. The researchers assumed that people would be happiest when they were most financially secure in life. What they found, though, was that people were actually happiest when they felt like what they were doing had a purpose, even if that purpose made their life messy or challenging or complicated. And so what they found was the happiest point in people's lives were not when things were simplest and most secure, but when things felt like they mattered the most. Faith isn't safe, but living by faith will give you a sense of purpose like nothing else will. So you can attend church, give a little money, sprinkle some Bible verses in your social media pages, and not exercise any faith. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no risk. Faith involves taking some risks to accomplish what Jesus would want done. Things that are destined to fail without divine intervention. Let me just tell you, this church plant should have failed like 1,000 times over, and yet it keeps going. Not only because of your kindness and faithfulness, but above all because God keeps showing up. He keeps making a way forward and through. Having faith, exercising faith, means not choosing the easy path, the path of least resistance, because you believe happiness doesn't lie in safety, but in purpose. In purpose and meaning. Rosa Parks, by faith, refused to yield her seat to a white man when the bus driver demanded it. By faith, she changed things. By faith, she went to court, stood up for her God-given rights, and she changed things. By faith, Scott Harrison, who was a club promoter, you can go to that next picture there, Sean, traveled all over the world throwing these huge parties for MTV and these big Hollywood execs. I mean, he had everything he could want: money, women, drugs, anything he wanted he could get. He has an encounter with Jesus, spends a year traveling around the world on a boat that goes around and offers free medical aid to people, and he realizes one of the biggest issues in the world is people don't have clean drinking water, and it causes all kinds of health issues. He comes back to New York City, and out of his small apartment, he starts a nonprofit called Charity Water that has brought clean drinking water to 12 million people. By faith, he said, I'm going to change things. Because, a billion people, when he started this organization, don't have access to clean drinking water. And he says, I'm going to change that. I'm going to do something about it. He could have said, I'm making good money, I've got a safe life, everything's secure. Instead, he says, I'm going to start a nonprofit, I'm going to change things. Mark Batterson, by faith, started a church in Washington, D.C. You guys know I love Mark Batterson. Like, he was a big impact on my own journey. He tried to start a church in Chicago, and it failed. And he's like, well, I guess I could go and just take a regular pastoring job. Instead, by faith, he moved to Washington, D.C., where he knew no one. He started his first service with 3 people, and today National Community Church serves thousands of people across D.C. They have a nonprofit coffee shop where they give 100% of their revenue away to spiritual projects. They just built a dream center on Capitol Hill to serve underprivileged youth and the incarcerated. Faith is doing things that don't make sense unless there is a loving, generous Father behind the world and behind you. It's taking a risk to do good because you know God has your back. Faith is daring to fail in order to make the world a little better, a little more like Jesus would want it to be. And that can seem daunting, right? But Jesus always does the heavy lifting. Let me just tell you, I haven't done anything that's produced any good results as a church planter. It's always been God despite me. God with me, not because of me. If you look at this list of the heroes of faith, you know what it is? A list of messed up people who kept failing over and over and over and over again, and yet God produced something great out of them when they chose to trust Him and take a risk. All these people are ordinary people who became extraordinary because they lived by faith. Rosa Parks lived by faith, became extraordinary. Scott Harrison lived by faith, became extraordinary. Mark Batterson, we could go through this list of heroes, Moses and Abraham. Ordinary people, extraordinary because they took a risk to trust Jesus. There's nothing different between you or I or any of the heroes of faith. They all had a moment where they could keep living quiet, ordinary lives, where they could decide to live as if a good and generous God had their back, and they chose to take a risk. That doesn't mean it is easy. That doesn't mean it isn't painful. Starting this church has been hard. Darby and I talk about that often. There's been heartbreak and betrayal, disappointment, and depression. And I'll tell you, this has never been boring. If you want a boring Christian life, there's a path for that, but it's not a path of faith. Darby and I sometimes talk about what it would look like if we did something else somewhere else. Last night, I was probably thinking about this message, but I had this nightmare where we just shut everything down. And I was like, yep, church plant's over. We're just going away. And neither of us would trade what we've learned through this step of faith. Neither of us would trade the relationships we've made. Neither of us would trade how we've grown. Yes, there are simpler paths with better paychecks and better perks, but at the end of your life, it's not how much money you have in the bank that you'll look back on. It's how many opportunities you had to do something that made a difference, and you said, I wasn't brave enough. I wasn't willing to take a risk, and you regret playing it safe. The goal of life is not to arrive safely at death. Faith makes us dangerous. Faith is an adventure. It's a flame, and it spreads, and it changes things. It burns out the new, it burns out the old, and it makes way for the new. We all have a short window on this planet. None of us are going to live forever. We're like a match lit for a moment that burns out almost immediately. I'm going to try to live as best as I can, as if there is a good God announcing his good reign, which is arriving soon, and I'm going to live by faith to show that. When people look at the crazy stuff that we do, like starting a church or starting a charity to bring water to people who don't have clean drinking water, they're like, what is this person thinking? This only makes sense if there's a good God behind them. I'm going to try to spread my fire as far as it will burn, and I hope I light some other fires and people along the way. Religion without faith, religion without risk is boring. Jesus wants to invite you into an adventure. He wants to invite you to live by faith. He takes a risk for his glory and other people's good. If you want your spiritual life to come alive, take a spiritual risk for Jesus' glory and someone else's good. When we exercise faith, to right the wrong, to set evil to flight, to live as citizens of faith, the writer of Hebrews says the current world wasn't worthy of those type of people, those heroes of faith, people who lived like that. Ordinary people who took a risk on the faithfulness of Jesus. So the question I think we have to ask is the world worthy of us? The heroes of faith overthrew governments. They dealt out justice. They claimed promises. They shut the mouth of lions. They quenched raging fires. They made narrow escapes. They found strength in weakness. They won hard battles. They put evil to flight. They saw miraculous cures. Now it's our turn. What will you do with faith? Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you that you are a good God and that you have our back. Thank you that your kingdom is breaking through into this world to change things. That you will one day rule as king and set everything right. And God, we are the advanced forces for your kingdom, beginning to set small things right as a foretaste, letting the world see what it's going to look like when you come and you make all sadness pass away. God, help us to live by faith, to take risks, to build relationships, to take risks, to risk our reputation, sometimes our resources, our security, our comfort, in order to see the world change for the better, for your glory, and for other people's good. Amen.
Talking about faith, it's a good time because y'all have sung this song before, so hopefully you know it. Marissa is not feeling well, so this is the first time I'm playing through this song, so let's just worship the Lord. I love this first line. Yeah, absolutely. The Lord will be worshipped. So
Here we go. But this first line is, the weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. And that is a promise that we can take all the way into eternity. We are excited that you are joining us. Please let us know. Horizon Community Church donates $25 in your honor to Compassion International, and you can find out more on their website at compassion.com. And just let us know, either drop us a message or send us an email at horizonphilly.com/contact. If you'd like to give to support the work that Horizon is doing in the city, town, world, you can do so online at horizonphilly.com/give. We have Venmo, PayPal, or also in the bucket by the front door. Our Wednesday prayer call is back on 6 p.m. every Wednesday via Zoom, and we can send you that link if you need it. Our new series, next week, Al is going to be ending our series on faith, and then Alex is going to kick off a series on heaven and hell and the common misconceptions. And there's the phone number there, 484-380-5833. If you have any questions about heaven or hell that you're like, hey, I've always heard this, or what about this? Text that number and text Alex, and he will work that into sermons or be able to open a dialogue with you about that. I know there's a lot of ambiguity about some of those things sometimes. Our spiritual discipline for the week is self-denial and serving. I don't like self-denial, I like to eat especially, and lots of other things, sleeping, all the good things in life, but really self-denial and serving, willingly giving up something to deny yourself so you can spend that time or spend that money focusing back on God and giving extra to others in need, or giving to those resources that benefit somebody else. Skipping a meal, refocusing on the needs of others, and being able to use that time to pray. Our core value for the week is kingdom-minded. We believe the kingdom of Jesus is breaking into our world, and he will one day rule as king and set everything right. Our world is very broken. Nobody disagrees with that. And so that is our hope, and that we will be kingdom-minded, looking for that day. Everything sad is going to become untrue. We live as residents in a kingdom that is coming already. It just has not fully yet come. And we act as agents of the coming King that will set things right. This week, we pray that you will join the heroes of the faith by taking risks on the generous goodness of Jesus. You are dismissed.